What's up, VIPs? Welcome to this special live stream here as we start the new year. It's January 3rd. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're watching this on the replay, well, thank you for taking time out of your day to watch it. You can, of course, always leave your comments and everything down below. And if you have questions or thoughts or anything, leave them in the comments. Thank you so much for watching this. And if you're joining me live today, thanks for taking time out of your day. We're going to talk about a life lesson we can learn about being visually impaired, and we can learn that from Rocky Balboa. And if you don't know who that is, don't worry, I'll explain all of that here in just a few minutes. Let's go ahead and get down into the chat, and let's see what we can do here. As always, takes me a second to get around the neighborhood here. Let's see here. Hey there, Live Accessible, Live Accessible, Live Accessible? No, Live Accessible. I'm thinking it's a live stream. Oh, it's good to see you. Hey there, Yellow Paper Crown. Good to see you. Glad that you're here. We're having a good time so far. Let's see what else we got in here. Hey, Sergey. Good to have you here on the live stream. Want to just give a couple of seconds here to get people into the live stream saying, hey, where are you from, all that sort of thing, and then I'll jump into the life lesson we can learn from Rocky Balboa. Let's see here. Holly, I think it's Holly. My voiceover says Holly or Khalid. It could be one or the other, but hello, thank you for joining us. Hey, Garrett, thank you so much for the kind words. Glad you enjoyed the video, so glad you enjoyed that. Let's see here. Hey, Anna, how are you? Good to see you. Hi, Carol. Oh, all the way from Dublin. Very cool. Very cool. I always find it fascinating when we can talk to people around the world. Very cool. Let's see here. Give another couple of seconds for people to come in, then we'll get started. Hey, Vincent. Glad to see you here. I'll make sure my cord's not in my way. Let me turn my phone on mute. That's embarrassing. There we go. And if you can't see, I'm wearing, I'm from Indiana, so I've got all my I've got an Indianapolis Colts t-shirt on and an Indiana Hoosiers red sweatshirt hoodie on. So I'm decked out in my Indiana gear today. Not necessarily because I'm a big sports person, but because people buy me stuff and I like it, so I wear it. So there you go. Let's see. I really want to visit Ireland too, Yellow Paper Crown. I want to go to Europe in general, just all over the place. I think it'd be so much fun. Hey, Celine, glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. Isn't it fun when you hear your name called out in the middle of a live stream? You're like, it really is live. This is great. Oh, hey, Fran, from another Irish person. Hello, hello. So glad you could join us. Let's see. Hey, Ryan, glad to have you on here. Let's see. Vincent says that Larry Bird is the best basketball player in the whole world. I think Michael Jordan might have him beat, but I do think Larry Bird was an awesome basketball player. And as a matter of fact, in Indiana, down in the southern part of the state, there is a city called French Lick. Not a joke. That's the name of the city, French Lick. And there is a restaurant there. It's not his restaurant, but it's a restaurant. It's kind of a bar. And there's just like Larry Bird pictures and signed basketballs and all kinds of stuff all over the wall. So they love Larry Bird in that area. I went to Indiana State where Larry Bird went to college for a bit. And of course, I live in Indiana, and you got to know Larry Bird in this area for sure. Hey, Safe Pet Haven. Glad to have you here all the way from Dallas, Texas. So glad you could join us. Let's see here. Let's see. Yes, Larry Bird is from Indiana, so that's all that matters, right? Yes, French Lick, Yellow Paper Crown. That's the name of the city. No joke. Actually, it does have a really neat, there's a big casino and hotel there, and it's got a great indoor water park called Big Splash Adventure. So, hey, there you go. Let's see here. Let's see here. So Fran says it's 8 p.m. there. It is 3 o'clock, just after 3 p.m. here. So that is where it at. And of course, on the West Coast, I think it's about noon. So everything, we got all kinds of time zones here, don't we? All right. All right, guys. Well, looks like we've got lots of people in here today, and I'm going to take that one earbud out just because I need to hear myself a little better. But we've got some folks here, and it's going to be a great time. And today we're talking about a life lesson we can learn from Rocky Balboa about being visually impaired. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then I'll jump back into the chat a little bit later. So be aware that the chat may be behind once I come back into it. So I may go back to chats that, you typed in 20 minutes ago and I'm hitting them. But that way I don't have to be interrupted by, constantly going through the chat and try to listen to it while I'm talking. So hopefully that makes sense. And if you type, yeah, that makes sense, and I don't talk about it for 20 minutes, you'll know why. All right, so Rocky Balboa. Now, let me give a brief introduction if you don't know who Rocky Balboa is. Back in the late 70s and 80s, and even now into the 2000s, there was a series of movies called Rocky. Rocky 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Rocky Balboa. There's been a couple of Creed movies, and that's in the Rocky franchise as well. But Rocky is a movie about a boxer starring Sylvester Stallone. Now, the original Rocky was written by Sylvester Stallone and I believe won Best Picture in 1976. It does not look like a Best Picture contender in our sort of day and age, but it's a really good movie. And it's basically about this young guy, Rocky Balboa is his name. He's from Philadelphia, and he wants to be a fighter, but he doesn't have a lot of money, and he's not a huge guy, and he wants to fight and all this sort of things. And it's very much that underdog kind of story. And it's a lot like Rudy, if you've ever seen that movie. It's very much that underdog story, and he's always fighting uphill, and it's the whole premise of the Rocky franchise is Rocky overcoming the odds to win the battle and that sort of thing. It's actually a great franchise. I love the character of Rocky. I actually think Sylvester Stallone does some of his best acting in the Rocky franchise. So, that's neither here nor there, but I think it's really good. If you haven't checked it out, you can check it out. Rocky, it's a great series. Anyway, so Rocky, boxer, fighting, that whole sort of thing. That's the premise. Now, in Rocky Balboa, which was made in 2006, basically the premise is there. Rocky is older now, but he still wants to fight a little bit, and he gets back into the ring. So it's kind of a cowboy who's ridden off into the sunset, but now he wants to come back and have one last round, that sort of thing. He is having a conversation with his son, who is an adult at this point, a young adult. And so he's talking about how he wants to do this, and his son is saying, how can you do this? This is going to embarrass you. This is going to embarrass me. I'm living in your shadow. And Rocky gives him this big speech about how, you're looking for things to blame things on, and you're going to blame it on me, blame it on this, blame it on that, and that whole sort of thing. Now, here's the interesting thing that Rocky says, and this quote from Rocky, since I heard it, it has impacted me, more than almost any other quote. There are a lot of great quotes out there, but this one so impacted me. And I say this all the time, and I just really love it. Now, he's in the context of this whole speech about how you've got to be a person who's going to keep going and try your best and live your hardest and that sort of thing. And he says about how life, no one, not you, not me, not anyone else, is going to hit as hard as life. And, it'll beat you to your knees and keep you there and that sort of thing. But then he says this great quote that I love, and it says this, and I hope I quote it right. And it says, quote, I don't want to misquote this. That's the thing. Like, if I misquote it, it's going to be terrible. Okay. So he's talking about, fighting and that sort of thing. And he says that it's about life. And he says, quote, life is not about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward, end quote. So that in and of itself is just such a great quote. Let me give it to you again. Quote, life is not about how hard you can hit, but about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. And I think that's the whole thing of Rocky. Rocky was never the toughest fighter, the biggest fighter. He's never going to land the biggest, grandest knockout punches all the time, but he was the kind of guy who could keep getting hit and keep getting back up. He kept fighting. He kept striving. When it was hard, it didn't matter because he lived a hard life. That's the whole premise of Rocky. And for you and for me, going through sight loss, if we're visually impaired, there's just a lot of things that are hard. I mean, let's just face it, just the littlest to the biggest things, whether it's not being able to see something in your kitchen, to not being able to drive, to not being able to read print books, not using technology the way that everybody else gets to use, all these little things. It can be very hard. But in those moments, it's not about how much we then can do to overcome it. It's about how much we can take and yet still overcome, yet still move forward. One phrase I always say is moving forward. A lot of people use the phrase, you need to move on. And I don't love that phrase because moving on implies that you forget about what's behind you. Now, I understand that there's a certain level of if you lose a loved one, and they pass away, life, quote, moves on, if you will. But I always say moving forward because we only have one direction to go. That's forward. We either get stuck or we move forward. We can't move backwards because, well, that's over now. That's in the past. We either get stuck or we move forward. And I think this quote helps us remember that sometimes moving forward is difficult. Sometimes it can be hard, but it's not about getting up and fighting and hitting everybody and knocking everything out and being the best we can be in all the time. It's about how many hits we can take and we're still moving in that forward direction. So I think we have to remember that with sight loss, it can be a challenge for sure. It can be an uphill battle a lot of times. Now, maybe you've been blind since you were, born or 2 years old or something like that, and you've been battling this for 30, 40 years. And so you feel maybe at this point, you're like, oh, I'm doing pretty good with it now. But maybe you just lost your sight in the last 6 months or a year. And it seems like you're only in round 2 or 3 of a major boxing match, and you're just not sure you're going to make it to round 12, or, you're not going to make it to see the next round even. Well, that is something that we all feel from time to time. And as I'm talking, feel free to leave things in the chat, your thoughts, your comments, your questions or whatever, and I'll check those out. But it's just such an interesting thought that so often we think we have to be, sort of the big bad person who comes out and says, okay, I'm not going to let this get me down. I'm going to, fight for it. I'm going to find out technology. I'm going to do all these things. And that's all good. Being your own advocate is really important. But sometimes it's more important to remember that you're going to get hit from every direction. Emotionally, psychologically, mentally, relationally. All these things are going to hit you when you lose your sight. It just happens. I mean, imagine how much it hurts whenever you lose your job because you now have sight loss and can't do that job anymore. Imagine how much it hurts the time you have to give up your keys because you can't drive any longer. All those kinds of things are hits that we take. Hits from the left, from the right, from the front, sometimes from the back. We just get hit. And what's important to remember is not about whether we're hitting back or we're saying, well, I'm going to overcome this, or I'm going to punch back, I'm going to be the great fighter. It's about how many of those hits can you take? How hard can you get hit and keep moving forward? Because that is, I think, the key to not only sight loss, but life in general. I think Rocky has a really good point here that life isn't about how hard you can hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and you keep moving forward. So let me jump back into the chat here and see what we got going on. Let's see. Let's jump back in. Let me jump down a little bit. Give me just a second as I go through some of this. Some of the chat, you guys are chatting, which is great. By the way, if you are chatting with each other in the chat, so awesome. I love the fact that we can do that because it helps us build community together, and I think that's fantastic. Let's see. Let's see here. Yes, Fran, it is. It's a brilliant quote. It really is. It's funny, too, because with the Rocky franchise, it's not one of those movies you think... I mean, if you know anything about Rocky, some of the quotes, Adrian, and he kind of has that goofy talk, hey, how you doing, I'm Rocky. But when you hear something like that, it's like, whoa, that really knocks you back because it's a great quote, and it's coming out of, not a really poetic kind of person, But Rocky really is and teaches you a lot about life. Let's see here. Let's go down a little bit. Let's see. Yes, it is beautiful, Yellow Paper Crown. It's a beautiful quote. Hey, Chad, glad to have you here. Happy New Year to you as well. Let's see here. Yes, live accessible. You have to stay strong. You have to keep going. And it can be challenging when you have to keep going. And people, it's easy to say, just stay strong and keep going. But when you're faced with it, man, that can be a real challenge. It's easy to sort of prepare. Like Rocky goes through this whole montage where he's running and doing one-arm push-ups and punching meat and chasing a chicken, all this other weird stuff. And that kind of stuff, it's like, you keep going, like, okay. But then when you're in the match, then when you're standing across the ring from that opponent, you're going toe-to-toe with that guy and he's punching you back. That's a little bit different than having to chase the chicken and hit the punching bag and that sort of thing. That's life. That's when they're coming at you. It's one thing to prepare. It's a whole nother thing to go toe-to-toe with your opponent. Happy New Year to you as well, Celine. Let's see here. Yeah, there is a big contrast between moving on and moving forward, Yellow Paper Crown. I think it's semantics a little bit, is moving on and moving forward. If I think about being in a journey, if I think about walking down a road, and I think about moving on, I think, okay, I've stopped at this tree. Now I'm moving on past this tree. This tree's in my past. It's over, and I'm never going to deal with it again. But if I'm moving forward, things can move forward with me. Now, obviously, the tree is not going to move forward, but, people can move forward with me. Lessons move forward with me. Things I've learned and things I've gone through, they can move forward with me. Sight loss doesn't get left in the past. Maybe the moment you lost your sight gets left in the past, but the effects don't. They go forward with you. But the key is to keep moving forward. There's another great movie. It was a Disney movie, and I think it was Meet the Robinsons. And one of the quotes they kept saying in there was keep moving forward. It's a Walt Disney quote as well, but it's just keep moving forward. And I think that's a great, that's the big difference between that and moving on. Let's see here. Chad says he lost 75% over the last couple of years. It's been tough, and I totally understand that. When I lost my sight, I lost probably at least that much in about 6 to 8 weeks, and it's just like, wow, man, how am I going to deal with this? How am I going to overcome this? That's when you stand toe-to-toe in the ring across from that opponent, and you're getting punched in the face, and you got to deal with it. Then you've got to, imagine you've got to learn how to use a computer. You've got to learn how to get around because you can't drive anymore. You've got to learn how to maneuver the kitchen and all these sort of things, all while getting punched in the face. It's not an easy task whatsoever. So I totally understand that for sure, Chad. Let's see. Yeah, I've known people that have lost their job because of sight loss, Yellow Paper Crown. They have lost their job. I knew one guy, he had a baby on the way and lost his job because of sight loss. So not only was he preparing for this new baby, in general, life changes when you have a kid, but he lost his job in the process. So imagine getting punched in the face while trying to hold a baby, right? It's just a challenge. Let's see. Let me go back there. Chad mentioned how he has gone through a lot, but he's back on his feet, and he says that sight loss doesn't change who he is, just the way he sees things. And that's so true, Chad. That's such a great point, that it doesn't change who we are. Rocky was the kind of person who had to dig down deep and overcome certain things, whether that was in his real life, in his relationships, in his parenting, in the ring, wherever. He had to dig down deep. It didn't change, who he was. The fight didn't change who he was. And I think with us, the sight loss doesn't change who we are. It almost challenges us to really find out who we are, because we're not just blind people, we're people who happen to be visually impaired. So that's a great way to look at it for sure. Let's see here. Yes. Fran talked about getting hit by somebody on Christmas Day by a family member. And yeah, I've gotten hit emotionally, mentally, all those relationally, and you get hit. And sometimes as you grow, you find that you're able to take more and more hits. If you walked into the boxing ring and got hit today and you weren't prepared, you get knocked out in 2 seconds, it'd be over. But the more you prepare, the more you plan, the more you get hit, the more you can take, and the more you can keep moving forward in the midst of those things. Yes, Carol mentioning, she mentioned she feels really tired finding new things you can't see, and that's such a good point. Sometimes the other night we went to a thing at some friend's house, and their house is really dark. Like, they don't have a lot of overhead lighting, and my eyesight was like twice as dim as it normally is, it feels like, and my eyes were strained. It was just like, oh, this is such a challenge. But, that's just how it goes sometimes with physical sight loss. You have physical repercussions. Being tired, I've been tired a little bit lately, and that's not abnormal. Sometimes mental fog can happen because of it. People think, oh, well, you're only affected, your sight's the only thing affected. That's just not true. There's lots of stuff affected. Let's see. Let me go down a little bit here. Yes, Celine says her son is a VIP and says life must go on. And yes, it does. It must continue. Life will continue with or without you. And sometimes it continues without you. And I remember being in college and, being in my dorm and not wanting to go out and do anything, but life continued whether I liked it or not. So eventually I got, sort of up and moving and moved on with life. I got back on the bandwagon, if you will, that sort of thing. So for sure. Let's see here. Okay, I think I'm back to the end. Okay, I think I'm at the end of the chat, so that's good. Vincent mentioned he was a sewing machine mechanic, but can't do that anymore. Now, I'm sure, Vincent, you probably have then a very detailed technical mind, so you can probably find other things to do with, even with vision loss. And I think you've mentioned on some other videos, the comments you've left about building like a lightsaber type thing. And so I'm sure your talents and skills can be used in other ways. Just finding those other ways will be the challenge. That'll be sort of the, the fight that you're in a little bit, like to find those other ways. But I'm sure that you'll be able to, because you probably have that mind to do those things. That kind of job sounds torturous to me because I'm not detail oriented. I was like, how do you put this in there thing? I'm not. But that's the beautiful part about all of us. We're all so different, and we all can find those things. Let's see here. Chad says he's been binge watching all day on my channel. Thank you so much, Chad. I really appreciate that. That gives me a little bit of oomph to keep going. So that's very cool. And you're welcome for doing this. Oh, cool. So Vincent says he and his son just built an arcade cabinet. His son sort of saw the thing and that sort of thing. I know my son and I will do that sometimes with different things. Like last night we were cooking dinner and I said, hey, I need you to do this and this. And I kind of just was using his eyes in those moments. But he's gotten really great at cooking things. And so we kind of do that. And honestly, it's built in relational time with you and your family. So that's a really good thing. Let's see here. So if you guys have any other questions, obviously the theme of this is about that quote, life's not about how hard you can hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. So if you want to share, I know Fran has, but if you want to share some of the ways that you, quote, get hit in life, what are some of the things that you've experienced that have been some hits to you? Has it been relational? Has it been emotional, mental, physical, psychological? Like, what are some of the hits that you've experienced in losing your sight, no matter what it may have been? Let's see here. So yeah, share that in the comments or share that in the chat because I want to hear those things and we can talk about them a little bit here. Let's see. All right. All right, take just a second to listen to this. My time is 3:24. We're doing good on time, so if you guys want to chat anymore, feel free to leave it and we'll chat about it. And of course, if you have any questions about anything as well, maybe you have a question about technology or something like that, of course, you can leave that in the chat as well. We can talk about that. Some of the live streams, I'm trying to determine how much needs to be a topic and how much can be sort of Q&A as well. And it doesn't really matter to me. I'm fine with whatever, so whatever you guys want to chat about. Yes. Yellow Paper Crown mentioned it's very hard to ask family members or friends for help because we need to be independent, we need to be strong, those sort of things. And yes, we do need to be independent. That's true. We should be able to be independent people, go out and do things on our own and make our own food and do our own shopping and whatever. We want to be independent people, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's a great thing. And I think we just have to remember that asking for help doesn't mean we're not independent. If we ask for help to see something, or what does this say, or hey, can you help me do this activity? I mean, sighted people ask for help all the time with things because maybe their skill set doesn't allow them to do that certain thing. Whether it's, complicated math, or, whether it's, hey, can you help me on this project because I need an extra set of eyes to understand this for me. I don't mean eyes physically, sort of going through the process of thinking about things. Sighted people ask for help, so there's no reason we can't ask for help. Just because we have a visual impairment doesn't mean we can't ask for help, and it doesn't mean we're not independent. And I think that's really a key thing to remember. Now, Yellow Paper Crown, I will admit, it can be hard sometimes because it means, oh, I need help. I wish I could do this on my own, but I can't. And then that starts a whole flurry down the rabbit trail, if you will. But I encourage you to take the time when you can and ask for help, and ask for simple things. That way, when it comes to something you really need help with, some big things, you won't be too embarrassed to ask for the help. Let's see. Oh, yes. So Vincent talks about the biggest hit he's had is independence. He mentioned living out in the woods, far away from people, and I know that can be a challenge. When I first lost my sight, I lived in a really small town with no public transportation. I lived in an area where there just wasn't much to do or get around to, and that can always be a challenge. So independence is a big thing. We just talked about that, of course, with Yellow Paper Crown. It's just a challenge, learning what independence really means and how it affects us on a daily basis. Let's see. Oh, yes. Chad, this is a good one, Chad. Chad mentions that his sort of biggest hit right now is just the mental side of things. He's struggling with the white cane and what other people think. Man, Chad, welcome to the club. Let me get your membership card out for the people that feel this way. I've talked to so many people, including myself, that are embarrassed by the white cane, that are like, oh, why do I got to use this cane? People are staring at me. Ironically enough, not that we can see them staring at me, but, or see them staring at me, I should say. But, that's just what happens. We're self-conscious. We've never had to use a cane before. Now that we have to, what are people going to think? And for me, it's not always just strangers. It's the friends that I have. I go out a lot of times without my cane. If I'm with a sighted person, I'm usually pretty good about getting around. But if I'm alone, I always use my cane, especially for identification purposes. But for example, if I go out with friends I've been out with before where I didn't use the cane and now I'm using the cane, I'm like, what are they going to think? Are they going to think I'm broken? Is something wrong with me? They're going to ask me weird questions. Are they going to be embarrassed to have me using the cane around them? Like all these weird questions I have to overcome because using a cane can be so helpful. Like I said, identification, people can see the cane and know, for the most part, they'll know that you're visually impaired. And for things like stairs, it can be so helpful. Sometimes with taking steps up and down, it's just a challenge. But if I have my cane out, it's so simple and so easy. So I encourage you to keep working at it. There will come a point where it won't matter near as much, but I understand it completely, using that white cane. Let's see here. You're welcome, Celine. You're welcome for this video and all that I do. I appreciate it. Let's see. Carol mentions the worst hit was being told they had a rare condition and nothing could be done. Yeah, that's always a challenge where I remember when I first started losing my sight, there was this sort of moment of like, well, you might not get what you have, or get what you've lost back, but maybe more won't get lost, and then more started to go away. And then finally it came to this point where it was like, yeah, it's this, and there's no cure. There's no fix for this. You can't wear glasses. There's no surgery. There's no medication. There's nothing. This is it. And it's kind of like getting that knockout punch where you get knocked down and you're like, oh, I'm down on the mat, and you hear that 10 count going. And that's such a challenging moment because when you get back up, even if you get back up, it's like, what do I do now? Because now no longer are you going to live your life the same way you always did. You're going to live it differently. Not good or bad, just differently. And that can be a real big hit for sure. Let's see here. Let's go down. Celine says the iPhone has various kinds of accessibility. So the iPhone does have great accessibility features, Celine, and I won't necessarily go to all of them, but I use the iPhone 8 Plus. The iPhone 7 is the one my wife uses. It's a great phone, has great accessibility. All the iPhones have great accessibility features built into them, and you will find that once you learn them, there's obviously a learning curve when you haven't used them before, but they're great, great phones. And I think once you have, and there are videos on my channel about voiceover and things like that that you can watch and learn a little more about the iPhone. And of course, there's videos all over YouTube and stuff all over the internet about how to use an iPhone for the visually impaired. So check it out for sure. Let's see. Yes, so Chad says he's still waiting for mobility training, so O&M training as we call it, orientation mobility. Figuring it out on your own can be a challenge, so once you get that mobility training, that will be a big help because then you'll be a little more confident with using the cane. Let's see here. I'll go down. Hey Justin, good to see you here. Justin says it can be weird walking with a stick. Now, I always correct people when they call it a stick, Justin, when they say, is it your stick? I'm like, no, it's my cane. And the reason I correct them is because I get this idea of using like a piece of wood out from a tree, and I'm just, I don't know why. I think it's because it helps them understand that there is a reason I have this. It's not just something, it's not like, I think of like a walking stick. Now that's my own personal issue. I'm not blaming you for calling it. It's like, how dare you? It's not that at all. But I always say that because then people are like, oh, it's your cane. Well, what's it for? And then we can talk about it. So it's just a sort of conversation starter. But yeah, it can be weird using it because it's like, what's this thing out here in front of me? For sure. Let's go down a little more. Yellow Paper Crown says they just started using the cane a couple of weeks ago and prefer using it in front of strangers instead of using it in front of friends and family. And they're not sure why. Well, that makes perfect sense to me. Strangers, who gives a crap what they think, right? But your friends and family, they've known you maybe a certain way. Even if you've been blind your whole life and you haven't used a cane, they know you as that. Like, oh, she's blind, but she doesn't have a cane like blind people, quote, blind people. Well, then you start using it and they're like, oh no, is this bad? Is it getting worse? Or, they think all these things because they're not sure. And it's not really, it's just like, I want more confidence. I think the cane would give me some confidence. So that makes perfect sense why you'd be more embarrassed in front of friends and family than total strangers. Let's see. Yes, mobility training is great. Chad says he started a Twitter account on meeting new people. First of all, let me go ahead and say Twitter's not the greatest place to meet people. Usually Twitter's like microblogging where it's like here and blah. I have found that even YouTube, Facebook are better places, and the reason for that is because there seems to be more interaction with what's going on. Now, maybe if you're a celebrity and have millions of followers on Twitter, that might be. But on Facebook, you can join groups and things like that to get more interaction. So I would suggest Facebook, or even here on YouTube, commenting, and people will comment back and that sort of thing. But if, I don't know what kind of phone you have, if you have an iPhone, both Facebook and the Twitter app are pretty accessible, and so they're able to use those with VoiceOver. Let's see. Let me go down a little more. Let me go down a little more. Yes, Justin, Twitter is very accessible. They've gotten even better over the last year or so. Justin says he calls it his blind stick. And hey, to each their own, Justin. Let me go ahead and clarify that. To each their own. You call it whatever you want, because for me, it's sort of just been my journey with that. So for you, it's a little bit different. And hey, I think kudos to you. Call it what you like. Some people I know call it, female names. And for them, hey, that's okay. Yes, Yellow Paper Crown says, I feel like Moses parting the sea when I'm using my cane in public areas. You know what? Sometimes it does that, and sometimes I just have to whack people in the ankle, which is always funny because they whip around real mad, and then they can't say anything to you because you're handicapped. But I will say, when I had a guide dog, that guide dog did a great job of that. He would just whip around through people, and they're like, oh, it's a dog. What are we doing? uh, let's see here. Let me go down. Chad says, doesn't have a smartphone yet. Been researching which one he should get. Oh, here's the big question, everybody. Which smartphone should he get? Now, don't go crazy in the chat telling him what to get. No, of course, everybody's going to have their opinion. Predominantly, I have found that in the blind and visually impaired community, people use Apple products. But does that mean you have to use Apple products? No. As a matter of fact, I released a video 2 weeks ago, last week, whenever it was, about should I pay the Apple tax? Do I have to, no, of course not. I have found that for me, iPhone is very accessible and works great. But Android has come leaps and bounds and just does a great job. So if you can get a cheaper Android phone that has TalkBack and Zoom, man, I'd say go that way. And if you're looking for a great channel that talks about Android, go over to The Blind Life. My good buddy Sam from The Blind Life. He has some great videos, a lot more than I do, about all kinds of great stuff, including Android. Let's see. Vincent says he has the LG, let's see, what was? LG V20, and he says it's amazing. So there you go, LG V20, check that one out for sure. And depending on the carrier and everything, you can probably get some deals on a phone, definitely. Let's see. Oh, looks like I've caught up to the end. Wow, I'm shocked. I mean, like I said, if you already have a smartphone, that's a different story. Like if I already have an Android, if I already have an iPhone, I'd say use what you got because you're familiar with it. But if you have nothing, man, it's a great time to research and figure it out. I will say that Android phones will have a lot more features, customization, things like that. But for me, because I'm visually impaired, I don't want all that. I just want it to simple. But for me, I like it simple. I just want it to work. My wife, we just bought a new MacBook Air for her and the kids. And we spent a little more money than we would have on a regular just PC laptop, but I know what it does and it works, and that's what I wanted to do. Let's see. Yeah, so Yellow Paper Crown says really like the iPhone, but Androids are just as good. It really depends on how you're using it, what you're familiar with, what you can get used to, all that sort of thing. I used an Android phone a few years ago. Just didn't like it, and I switched back to iPhone, and that's just what I want. That's what I stick with. But Androids can do so much, and they're great phones. Some of the flagship Android phones are better in many ways than iPhones, just with the features they have and the cameras and the Google Assistant is far better than Siri. I mean, we have Google Homes. We have a Mini and a Home. I just got some other speakers, and Google Home is great. Like the Google Assistant is leaps and bounds better than Siri. I mean, I think there's a debate on whether Alexa or Google is better, and I think they both have their great, high points, but then you have Siri way in the back. Siri just bites the big one, and I hate to say that about Apple products because I'm an Apple product person, but Siri just doesn't do it when it comes to that. So Android phones can offer a lot of great things if you are willing to get into that sort of ecosystem and use the phone the way that they've designed it to be used with TalkBack and Zoom. I will say, I think somebody pointed this out at one time, I like the Zoom feature on Android better because there's like, I think a triple tap and hold, and you can maneuver around the screen with one finger, and that's better to me than the way iPhone implements it. But, for the most part, I think iPhone works for me the best. Let's see here. Justin says he loves his iPhone and MacBook with VoiceOver. Yes, definitely. Once you get used to one, it's pretty easy to get used to the other one. So yeah, I think they're fantastic. They're more expensive for sure, definitely. But for me, I'm willing to spend a little more because I know how to use it and it just works for me and my family for sure. Let's see here. Vincent says he thinks I still should get a Chromebook. We did look at Chromebooks the other day to get for my kids, and Vincent says the accessibility features are pretty good on it. I'm sure they are. It's just not one that, like, we have to sort of put money into where it's going to have the biggest bang for the buck, if you will. And I didn't want to buy a Chromebook and then be like, oh, I don't know how to use this and that sort of thing. So we went with the MacBook because I'm familiar with it. I think honestly for me, if I'm familiar, that's what I'm going to go with. I don't like learning new things apparently. Let's see. Yellow Paper Gun says, I don't care about camera quality. I'm kind of blind. Yes, that is true. For me, I like the camera quality only because I like photography. And so when I'm out with my phone and I want to take a picture, I want it to be a decent picture. Now, these days, iPhones, HTC, LG, Samsung, they all have really good cameras. Like, yeah, maybe the nuances are different, the color spectrum and whatever. They're all really good cameras, and so you just can't go wrong. I remember my wife and I went to Disney a few years ago, and she had an iPhone, oh, what was it? I want to say either a 4S or a 5, I think it was a 5S maybe, something like that, 4S, 5S, a really older phone. And she took pictures with that and made like a book, like on Snapfish, I think. It was a book of memories, and they printed it all out. They looked great. And that was an older phone, and the pictures look fantastic. So honestly, nowadays, I mean, they're just great cameras. It doesn't really matter what you get. Let's see. Yes. So Vincent says he has an Alexa and a Google Home. They both do what the other one can't do, so that's great. The one thing I like about the Google Home is there's multiple accounts. So it recognizes my voice, my wife's voice, now my son's voice, so that when we ask, for example, to play music, it plays music from our individual accounts, and we'll play our playlist and that sort of thing. So I really like that feature on the Google Assistant. I think the Alexa combines with more things, but we don't have any smart home anything at this point, so I like the Google Home. And I think the Google Home just has really been good to us. I think Alexa was great and has been great and will continue to be great, but the Google Home just stuck, and that's what I'm going with. Sam, my good buddy Sam with The Blind Life, he has an Alexa, and he's talked about it. So I think Sam and I just buy the opposite things so that we can review it on on our channels. It keeps us productive. It's like, hey, I heard you have this. Like, you do the iPhone, I'll do the Android. And you do the Google Home, I'll do the Alexa, that sort of thing. So I think I'm just going to check with him when I buy new things. What do you have? I'll buy the opposite. We actually have different cameras now even that we're using. I had one similar to him, and he bought a different camera. So we have different cameras for our YouTube channel even. Let's see. Larry says he has the Samsung Galaxy S9, and he says accessibility is great on that. And Samsung does have a really great. Here's the interesting thing about Android. You have to know with the iPhone, they build the hardware, they build the software. It's all Apple. With Android's the software platform. Then Samsung runs Android, HTC runs Android, LG runs Android, the Google Pixel runs Android. They all run it a little bit differently. Samsung will have its own little things, and the Google Pixel has its own little things. I think if I were going to get an Android phone, it would be a Pixel, because I bet that the Google, because it builds Android, it's going to have the most native Android experience, sort of the most vanilla or basic Android experience, and I would want that. But yeah, my sister has a Samsung Note 9, I believe, and it's massive, which I love, and looks like a great phone. So I would definitely check that one out if I were to check a phone out as well. But yeah, they're great phones, for sure. Let's see. I'll go down a little bit here. So Chad mentions, okay, switching back to the white cane, Chad says he has an issue. He keeps getting stabbed in the gut when he's using his white cane because you'll hit a crack in the sidewalk. That's a classic thing, Chad. That happens to the best of us. So for one, I would encourage you to not hold the grip quite as tight. And when you're holding your cane, let me just go get my cane real quick. It's back behind me. Hold, please, while I go get my cane in the middle of this live stream. Okay, there we go. I don't know how you can see Chad or anybody else, but here I've got the. Let's see. My apologies if you're watching this now and you got disconnected. I apologize. Sometimes the internet just isn't perfect. Let's see. You can let me know. Let me know if I'm back on and you can hear me and see me. Let's see. Okay. I don't know what it is. Isn't that weird? Let's see. All right, so it looks like we're back. That's good. Yeah, sometimes the internet's just wonky. Even getting the better internet, which I do have now. Which, by the way, if you're wondering about that, I went with Xfinity or Comcast. If you're in the United States, I have Xfinity, and it seems to be doing better, except for little blips like this. And some of that's the internet, some of that's YouTube. I mean, imagine how many people are doing things on YouTube right now, and so am I. So, you know, and some of it's just who knows what. So there you go. All right. Well, let's check the time. I've got, oh my gosh, we've been on here almost an hour. So I am going to wrap it up here. If you guys have any last comments or something, you can definitely share them. But I want to thank you guys for joining me on this live stream. Just as a quick recap, remember that life is not about how hard you can hit, but about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward. We all face those times in our lives where we get hit mentally, emotionally, physically, psychologically, relationally, all those things. Even as we talked about today with technology, sometimes those can be hits as well. But it's important to remember that we can take all of those hits and we can still keep moving forward. So I encourage you all to do that. If you find questions or comments that you have later on, make sure that you leave them in the comments of this video. And you can always send me an email. My email address is Derek, D-E-R-E-K, at lifeaftersightloss.com. And I try to check those emails and respond when I can. You can hit me up there and, of course, leave the comments on this video as well. Let's see here. You're very welcome, Yellow Paper Crown. It was always a great time being on a live stream with you guys. I really appreciate it. I think that's all I've got for today. If you guys, again, have anything else, leave them in the comments of this video. Send me an email, and we will have a great time. Let's find out here where I'm at. Let's go up here. Okay. This is the fun part of doing a live stream when you're blind. You got to find out where the finish button is. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for watching wherever you are. And of course, remember that sight loss isn't the end. It's just the beginning. My name is Derek Daniel from lifeaftersightloss.com, and I'll see you all in the next one.